Hey, and welcome again to another episode of Nutanix Weekly, one of the many podcasts we produce here at XenTegra. It is content with context, as we like to say, and appreciate you listening in to another episode. I'm your host today, Phil Sellers. I'm the practice manager for Modern Data Center here at XenTegra, and I'm joined with a few friends around the horn today. So first up is Chris Calhoun, one of the solutions architects here at XenTegra. Chris, I know you're a newer voice here. How long have you been with XenTegra now?
I started in October 1st, so
All right.
4 months.
Yeah, so practically an old timer. He's working towards that status with us at this point, and former Nutanix sales engineer,
That's exactly right.
focused in the enterprise space. We're also joined with Jirah Cox. Jirah is a chief technologist. I always get your title wrong. This is going to become a gag, I think.
We should think of a better gag, but I say architect on our field CTO team.
All right, and smart guy. That's what that stands for, right? So
there's the gag.
Yeah. And also we've got Ben Rogers. Ben is an enterprise SE for Nutanix, based out of the Charlotte market, right?
That's correct. Glad to be here today from our GTS in Austin, Texas.
That's right. We've got a remote one. We're all in the same city for a different sort of podcast today, but we're getting ready to learn what's coming and all sorts of new things that we'll be able to talk about here in the coming future. But it's funny. There's no absence of announcements and new things happening inside the Nutanix ecosystem. We've got a lot of new announcements and a lot of new versions of software and capabilities that have just come out. So I think it's apt that we start with the core, and let's talk about some new AOS. Hot off the presses at the end of January, we've got the launch of AOS 7.0, and that's going to make a lot of people happy. New features, new capabilities, and we'll talk about some of those today. But this is hot on the heels of another major release, version 6.10, which rolled up a ton of capabilities. And so I guess, Jirah, I'll throw it to you. Is there any particular reason that we've gotten such a big release so quickly after another big release?
I mean, it was Christmas time, but a better reason to spoil the end of the article. It talks about how this release helps us launch and springboard into our new unified NCI release model, moving from the past of the STS LTS model to now in the new one with the planned. I think it calls out twice a year cadence, where customers can expect, when can I expect releases from Nutanix that bring new features? When can I expect maintenance releases? How long can I expect to run those releases? So we're moving into into kind of a two big releases per year that are here for all customers to consume now. So that's the real answer, is that 6.10 was our last LTS, and then this is our new release model.
That's awesome. I mean, this release is a big deal. We're celebrating AHV's birthday. It turns 10. Version 10 is packaged in as part of AOS 7. So that's a pretty big deal. I mean, Ben, I'll ask you, I mean, from your perspective, 10th anniversary and also AHV 10, I mean, what's that mean for customers?
Man, it's a proven solution. It's not something that's just been developed. It's something that we've had developed, it's deployed, it's hardened, it's proven. That's what the 10 years means. And so when we talk to customers about, a VMware takeout or, needing automation in an environment, and they need a hypervisor, whether it's for containers or something else, we can go in confidently and go, this is a proven solution. This is hardened. We have this in government agencies. We have it in commercial. We have it in enterprise. A lot of people are now running this. And since you've seen the Broadcom VMware acquisition, you've just seen the adoption of AHV, just JHunk. So good stuff, man. So 10 years to me means reliability and proven performance.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, it's battle tested. There's thousands and thousands of deployments running all over the world in all sorts of different places, from the data center to the cloud to the edge, as the blog post says here. So let's dig into the goodness of this new release and the launch. We're reviewing a blog post that's aptly named AOS 7.0 launch blog. It's out on nutanix.com/blogs. And this particular one's written by William Parks. So shout out to William Parks. Thanks for posting and giving us something to talk about. So let's dig in on some of the features. First up, inside of the blog post, we're talking about high availability and disaster recovery. Both of those really important concepts for all customers, but these are things that have long been inside of Nutanix. So what are we actually talking about in terms of new capabilities that we can make use of? Jirah, I'll throw it to you.
Sure. A big one. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for the whole podcast, but I think I'm safe to say we're all pro high availability, pro disaster recovery here, right? Not controversial topics, but cool to see them enhanced here for sure. A new way that we can make clusters more resilient, right? Supporting this new failure mode. If you've been with us in a meeting, been with us near a whiteboard, you've heard us talk about, RF2 and RF3 and how we can design a cluster to lose like a node or a disk unexpectedly, or to lose 2 nodes or 2 disks unexpectedly. And with this new design, we can now at the edge design a 3-node cluster to be able to withstand the loss of a 1 node and a drive at the same time and keep on running. So traditionally, in the past, on 3 nodes, that would have been violating the configurable availability of a 3-node cluster. But now with this new enhancement, we can actually do 3 nodes and still lose a node and a drive all at once and keep on ticking. So that's great, making it harder and harder for the cluster to fall over, even as it sustains, the real world events going on around it, right? Or somebody in the data center, tripping pretty badly over some cables and yanking some disks out as they fall down.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we're talking about this in a 3-node cluster configuration, because, Chris, I know as we're talking with customers, this is a configuration we're talking about more and more as we're exploring new, I guess, designs with our customers.
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to the Nutanix solution is a true enterprise grade solution. That's the difference in the focus on these edge locations now, especially being able to right size a configuration to know that you're getting the best performance and availability, and not just hey, let's install something and look the other way. For our customers, we're really focusing on these remote locations being just as important. And I think that that's really key too, of having a solid foundation and performance at those edge locations that they can rely on.
Yeah, and I think about also the licensing aspects. We have the new, I guess it's not new anymore, but a robo-friendly licensing method that I think is also increasing that interest on the edge. Ben, I see you shaking your head. Are you seeing more interest with that based on the licensing availability?
Well, the robo licensing is definitely an advantage, but I just see customers, as Chris said, they're looking at edge as more strategic than they had before. With AI coming down the path, scanning technology, particularly in manufacturing, these are all things that need to be right next to the lines or on the edge sites. And so the importance of the edge clusters and their performance and their reliability is just becoming more and more important as we roll these services out to the edge platforms. So as Chris said, a lot of customers, concentrate on data center. Edge was just, print, Active Directory. Now you're seeing people going, no, I need my edge services to be able to run these type of AI applications, scanning applications that are looking at quality and assurance and stuff like that. So you're definitely seeing a larger push to edge installs and the enterprise performance that you need from those installs.
Yeah. As we talk about those use cases, we talk about, other configurations. One that comes to mind is metro clusters too. When we start talking about that high availability and making sure that things are always up and available, metro is probably the gold standard there. There's some new things coming for metro users as well. Jirah, you want to dig in on that one?
Sure. So, to add some context, like you teed us up for, in the past when we've done Metro on Nutanix with AHV, we would have two workload clusters, right, where your VMs could float around there and run on either cluster A or cluster B or both in parallel for active-active. And then Prism Central lived outside of those two clusters and would live in a management site that was the third site acting like a witness site, and the witness functionality was embedded within Prism Central. Worked great. It meant that your management cluster, maybe needed to be a full cluster, maybe it needed to be a little beefier, right, to run Prism Central there. With this design, we can now also accommodate customers that want to run that witness kind of more like as small as possible, right? Like single node, very tiny, and just run the witness functionality itself, right? That tiebreaker of, did a site go down, or is there a network link here that's down instead? Are we split brained? And and weigh in there, right? Vote for me as a quorum member there on what do you see witness there. So now we can run a lightweight witness on a third site. Which now lets us put Prism Central at each of those workload sites. So you can have Prism Central that monitors and manages site A, Prism Central that monitors and manages site B, and then they both just chat with a lightweight witness that can run on a single node, can run somewhere else. Maybe if you're doing a factory, right, you've got data room A and B, then you have a little node somewhere on the factory floor, right, tucked under a desk or bolted to a wall, and all it's there to do is be a quorum tiebreaker. So now more flexible deployment options, to the way you opened it up, Phil. More flexibility around deploying truly resilient architectures for customers.
This one's near and dear to my heart because we did some really early metro clusters at a phone company I used to work with, and these designs have challenges that are a little different than other challenges. And so you guys are tackling a big one, which is that witness functionality and where does that need to live? And you're offering that flexibility. I think that underscores it really well. 7.0 is also making improvements when it comes to Nutanix multi-cloud snapshot technology. When we talk about this, maybe people listening haven't heard of multi-cloud snapshot technology. So, Ben, what is that technology, and how's it helpful for us?
Multi-cloud snapshot, and keep me honest here. This is the ability to be able to snap to other clouds. So you could be in Azure, but you might want to do a DR or a snap out to AWS, or you might be on-prem and you want to snap out to Azure, you want to snap out to AWS. The big deployment here is now being able to directly do that to objects within Nutanix and also S3 within AWS. That was not a feature that we had before, from what I understand, and has been introduced in 7.0.
Yeah, so the first offering of this ran in AWS, where you could run a cluster in NC2 and then also have DR for that cluster, right, to take all the data in that cluster and bunker it somewhere else, like in an S3 bucket, staying in AWS. With this enhancement, we've now taught all of our clusters everywhere, not just in AWS, how to send their data both to AWS S3 as well as to, of course, objects on Nutanix as well, which of course is S3 compatible storage. So now I can have a cluster that, if the goal is just send a secure copy of a snapshot of data, right, which can include all VMs if I want it to, or even just one VM, send it somewhere for security, whether that's for sending it down to S3, and now I can do all kinds of awesome data level protection on the S3 protocol. Or to your point, Ben, like send it across an availability zone, right? So from cloud region to cloud region, from on-prem to cloud, it gives us more ability, more flexibility, and even gives maybe some of our smaller customers or customers with like lesser sensitivity environments an ability to do DR, maybe at an even more economical price point, right? Because now there's no compute. I'm literally just taking bits somewhere, either in the cloud or on-prem, and just sending them to the cloud as storage versus needing to run a full DR cluster. So there's a lot of attractiveness there.
So let me ask a question. You gave a little bit of a history lesson here. Being a new Nutanix employee, I think is kind of fascinating. This technology started out in our cloud clusters, and then we built that back into our on-prem environment. Is that what you said?
Right. We shipped earlier versions of this last year as NC2 Cluster Protect, right, where a cluster running in NC2 could protect itself. Cluster running in NC2 in AWS specifically could protect itself to S3 storage in AWS specifically. This is now kind of an enhancement and more broadly applicable sort of second coming of that technology.
See, for me as an employee, I think that's awesome that things were developed in the cloud and were backfilled into the on-prem environment. Usually it's the opposite. You get it on-prem and then you try to force it out to the cloud. So to see that development path to me is pretty cool, man. To take the cloud's resources and go, hey, people need this on-prem, or we need to be able to bounce from one cloud to another to on-prem. Again, just the development process is just neat to me when I heard that history lesson. That's cool.
Yeah, when you don't differentiate and you just develop one cloud platform, it gets easier to kind of offer goodness broadly to more customers all at once.
And Jirah, I think I remember this being a topic from the .next release this past year, and obviously to see that implemented and used in a way to help folks focus on disaster recovery in 2025, I think is super critical in the sense that, there are customers that don't want to invest in a full, complete second data center for resiliency purposes that really just sits there. And I think that this offers a good flexible option so that you can know that your data is backed up as well as being recoverable in a more flexible manner instead of brick and mortar. We've got to have that second data center. We've got to have a like-for-like infrastructure. And I think that from a financial perspective really does lend itself for future improvements too for the Nutanix platform.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to say, but we all watch the headlines every day, right? And we can spot companies that we wish had better protection, better resiliency, more options for recoverability. And really, it's all of our day jobs, right? To meet with customers like that and say, look, I know the tech, your business and what you need. Let's find the right solution here. And now we have even more tools to bring to bear to do that.
Well, and I think that the snapshot technology, being able to store this long term in an S3 compatible object store, opens up a lot of freedom on-prem. So you're not having to maintain long-term snapshots and pay a penalty on your very expensive hardware, maybe on-prem. And so you've got another way to do that long-term archival of those snapshots. And I think that's a great use case in addition to DR from a compliance standpoint, from any number of reasons, being able to keep this online and available, but on a less expensive tier of storage is an advantage to the customer. So let's roll forward. So we've talked a lot about high availability and disaster recovery, but that's not the only goodness. We have some additional automation and management things that are coming. This blog post doesn't go into a ton of details around automation and management, but there's one big factor that we are getting with version 7.0, and that's new APIs. What's in this release that we can expect? Jirah, I'll throw to you.
So with 7.0, our v4 APIs are now generally available. What's exciting about this is, if you've been watching Nutanix for long enough, you've heard of at least a handful of API versions from v2 and v3. I think back in the day, like version 0.8 and all kinds of wild versioning to this. What this is really a wonderful grand unifying of all of our APIs. So now anything with Nutanix, there's one common API standard to do that thing and one place to go. They all flow through Prism Central. So that's awesome. It gives a lot of clarity, gives a lot of agility to our partners, right? Think about anything that I do on a Nutanix cluster, even our actions, right? Like when Prism Central talks to a cluster to build VMs or replicate them, now we even have better APIs that we can consume for our tooling. but also for things like all of our backup partners, disaster recovery partners, monitoring partners. This all gives them more powerful and more centralized and more streamlined APIs to make integrating with our stack so much easier as well. So it's great. It's more like a cascading release of like it's one thing that we do that then has 100 other things that it unlocks, and you'll see more goodness coming here, both from us and from our partners. But it is wonderful to now have it out the door. If this is something that you care about as a listener, like check out nutanix.dev, which is where we have all of our API documentation, code samples, SDKs, all documented. So it's easy to go in there, take a look around, and start kicking the tires on these more easily and faster.
That's been one thing that has fascinated me about the platform, is not only from an infrastructure stance, but what it brings to the development side of the house. And this consolidation of the APIs and the version 4 coming out is just another testament of that. And we're not only keeping up with infrastructure, but we're also keeping up with what developers need to develop applications and services on that infrastructure. So just another commitment to us as an IT community to stay ahead of the curve.
Well, and I think this is also underscoring kind of, and Jirah used the word unification a couple of times as we've talked today, but this also is kind of that migration towards Prism Central as the place to end all be all. More and more functionality moving up out of Prism Element into Prism Central. Now you've got that central point for all APIs. There's a lot, I think, that gets unlocked because you're thinking backups and things like that. I'm now thinking, what can we do from an assessment standpoint? We've got a central place to tap into all of that goodness and that data and help our customers as we kind of look at their clusters. So
sure,
a number of ways that you can extend that.
Yeah, Terraform, Ansible also are powered by the same kind of behind the scenes enhancements as well. So yeah, it's very exciting.
And back, quick story, back whenever I was working at Nutanix, I had a customer looking to integrate ServiceNow with some of their Nutanix platform. And at the time, I think the word unify makes sense to Jirah's point, is they were bouncing between version 2 and version 3 APIs. And now we've got a solid foundation to point all back to version 4 with specifics around Prism Central. And I think that our tie-ins and our offerings from ServiceNow, customers that are looking for XenTegra for guidance around that, we definitely can help with that. And it helps to have a seamless platform with Nutanix to now tie those two and integrate those two together.
And as we talk about everything that's going on from a HA and disaster recovery standpoint, security is a huge part of that. And we really didn't focus in on that, but there's security enhancements that are also coming with version 7. So let's dig in a little bit there on the security enhancements. Jirah, I'll throw it back to you again.
Sure. So thinking back to kind of how we started our life in the data center as a product, right, and thinking about data at rest encryption, or how do we write customers' data securely, encrypted at rest on a storage platform. When we got our start, 13, 14 years ago, it was almost like that Silicon Valley joke about this is where your box will sit, right? And that was where the keys in the data center lived. Like you could point and say they're either in this box or that box or some combination of the two, and like that was where the keys lived. And fast forward now to 2025, and most customers are not wanting to invest in like a hardware. They're called a key management server like that. A KMS now is usually more like a cloud service. And so with this, it's I was delighted to see this move from roadmap into a GA feature. We can now use the Azure KMS functionality, right? So that this can now, you can use a cluster on-prem, store your data securely, use a cluster, anywhere, right? So on-prem is one way to do it, but it could be a cluster anywhere that can reach Azure and now use their KMS service, right? So now what was a hardware-defined box of a workload, in decades past, now is an API call into the cloud service, but it's still that secure key vaulting somewhere else, right? So then you get the outcome as a customer of either checking that compliance and regulation box, or even the true mitigation of like, now the threat of hardware theft does not expose my data to bad guys.
that key management is not always a very thought of process, but it's important where those keys are stored, because just like your house, you lose a key, you're locked out. And I think a lot of customers don't spend time thinking through the implications of where their keys are managed, but having unfortunately seen the effects there, it's something we definitely need to talk more about from an advisory standpoint with customers. Key management, where we're keeping those, how we keep them secure. There's a whole talk track, I think, just around that topic that is not really getting as much airtime as maybe it should.
Yeah, I mean, Nutanix as a cluster for hosting workloads is wonderful at so many things. I think one thing that no one wants you to ever do is have us host that key management server on us managing our own keys. If that doesn't make any sense, give me a call. We'll have a little chat about chickens and eggs and how that works. And so, as a simple solution to a complicated requirement here, it's great to have this available now.
That's not the only thing that we're talking about from a security perspective. Flow network security is getting some love. We're getting multi-environment isolation policies, which I'm not a networking person, and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So I'm going to need Jirah to jump in here and explain what this multi-environment isolation policy is.
That's a great question. So we've had the ability to go in there and to do the easy SE level demo, say like isolate prod from dev VMs easily with like a checkbox, right? The real world, I don't know if you know this, tends to be a little more complicated than the average SE demo. And so now, like, what if I have a test and a UAT and a pre-prod and a smoke test environment? And now we can have multiple environments that we can simply say, all of these can't talk to anything else, right? If you're in one of them, you can only talk to the one you're in and not the others, right? So that can now be, I don't know, 2 points to final line. So 5 or 6 points is like a cloud maybe. But you can now have much more complicated isolation environments here, right? So that, not just prod and dev, but now prod and dev and UAT and whatever can all be isolated from each other. And then there's also some goodness here that came to even the UI, right, around helping our customer administrators be able to quickly take stock of what is this flow rule doing? What's it blocking? How would I add new allowed sources or destinations or protocols, or even do things like reuse? Like if I define my Active Directory domain controllers one time, I should be able to use those in multiple policies, right? And use that kind of almost like a variable expansion within my firewall rules more repeatedly, right? So kind of, a little bit more blending maybe traditional firewall management UX with VPC management and microsegmentation on our platform.
I like the way that it sums it up here. Less complex policies can be updated faster with more confidence. So again, one of the core tenets of Nutanix, simplification, kind of ringing true as we see this technology get implemented. And I mean, I guess, as the outsider to Nutanix, I appreciate the simplicity that gets driven into flow network security. It's approachable in a way that makes it easier for a customer to be successful at the end of the day as they approach microsegmentation. So that's a really welcome thing to see that continuing even as we do more from a functionality standpoint.
I think one of the cool things that's mentioned in this article is about just the power of our categories. I talk to customers all the time about how they can use categories to organize their environments and be able to kind of protect yourself. So if you've got categories implemented, if you have like your replication policies and categories and you put a VM in that category, it's automatically going to fit those replication policies. The same thing here for the security policies. You'll be able to inventory and be able to also take multiple services or multiple apps and put them under one category so that they all can receive the same policy. So again, it talks about that here in this article, but man, we're always talking to customers about how they can use categories to stay organized, streamline, again, simplify the environment so you know what's going on and you can look very quickly if you have questions about it.
Well, and it doesn't stop with security when we're talking about networking in this release. There's more things happening also in the flow virtual networking, which is the overlays portion. Traditionally, we think of that as the overlays in the VPCs, but we're also getting load balancing. So integrated layer 4 load balancing built into AHV. That's a pretty exciting enhancement. You know, the fact that we can do this inside of one system as opposed to having to layer in other solutions and the programmability that it should bring us, both are exciting to me because that helps in the journey around cloud native and Kubernetes, because you rely on services like load balancing within their frameworks as well. I do want to kind of focus a little bit more on the performance enhancements that come with AOS 7. You know, as I talk to customers, Chris and I both, we were with a customer a couple weeks ago. We were touting the fact that as Nutanix continues to develop and release, things are getting faster. Things are being optimized. So you're getting more performance out of your storage. You're getting more performance out of the hypervisor. AOS 7 has a lot of things here that we're starting to tap into. What's happening from a performance standpoint, Jirah?
So when you're using our flow networking stack, right, with VPCs, which is like our software-defined networking functionality, there's ways you can choose to deploy that either for NAT or for no NAT functionality, right? How should our software-defined networks connect to your, let's say, hardware-defined networks, right? As a routed decision, right, over either static routing or BGP, things like that, or over like NAT gateways. And so what's cool in this release now is that ability for those gateways to be highly available, right? We can scale up and deploy multiple of those for both for more throughput and for also faster failover if one of them were on, like, say, a piece of hardware that does go belly up. So, so more good things. Not the traditional area where we thump our chest around too much around performance is like network packets themselves, but it's a critical functionality to deliver, right, as part of being, being, acting, and delivering like a cloud operator and a cloud platform.
Yeah, and as the blog goes on to say, we're also complementing those changes with new hardware. You know, Intel, their 4th generation Sapphire Rapids, and AMX on AHV. Those are also driving additional performance. What are we tapping into there that's helping us out?
Tapping into global demand for AI on all of the things. I would say, as a simple answer, right?
I guess reacting to then instead of tapping into.
The word is inferring, Phil. The inference is the name of the game. But if AI in the data center stays defined by expensive GPUs that consume all of the power and generate all of the heat and are the constraint, then there's a scaling limit, right? When there's other places that AI can run in the data center, like powered by AMX on the Intel chip itself in the host, well, now it's more interesting, right? Because guess what? Every data center has, kind of by definition, more CPUs than it does GPUs. I'm sure there's some exception that I'll hear about after this podcast goes out. But for the most part, more CPUs than GPUs in the world. So the more that CPUs can do AI offloading from GPUs, well, now there's just more AI, more computing available to AI, broadly speaking, in the world. So it's great to see that. And I can think of cool stuff like even at the edge, perhaps, right? Like the edge is going to have CPUs. And when those can do inference, well, now I have more AI closer to maybe my pieces of the business that generate data that I want to feed into an AI model for smarter, faster inference.
Yeah, I see a complaint from a Bitcoin miner coming your way, but outside of that, I think it's probably true. Most of the times, we've got more CPUs than we've got GPUs, and that That is an interesting topic. We were talking a little bit about sustainability, so I'll ask about this too. We've got more and more demands, both from CPU and GPU for power, and so that's becoming a more limited resource. And we're starting to hear people talking about planning for the power consumption at a customer level. Chris, I mean, what are you seeing, I guess, kind of from that perspective as you're working with our customers and talking to them around power consumption in the data center?
Specifically around the AI model, along with the GPU discussion, there was a small drafting or type establishment that was a very small set of engineers that were planning growth without necessarily knowing what they're planning for. And in that, they were specifically looking at Nutanix, because the idea is, with the solutioning in Nutanix, obviously as a software-defined solution, they get the benefit of these 7.0 improvements. And that's really where they saw an opportunity of, all right, how do we get in now with a solid foundation from Nutanix, knowing that we're going to need GPUs in either everything, or have to look at something, or should look at something more focused around, hey, can we focus on those better CPUs? And maybe this being a small site, then this makes sense to focus on Nutanix. And that's where I think that it's a balance. Obviously, power consumption is something that's it's becoming more relevant. But I wanted to give that example because to me that makes sense, because customers are having to decide, where do we invest? Because legacy hardware is not going to do it. They've maintained that as long as they could, and now it's time to forward plan and look at the next 10 years. What's the technology that's going to run my stack? And I know that Jirah has mentioned this before. It's Nutanix is here for today's workloads, but also for the next 10 years. And that's the foundation.
Well, and that
I think
customer,
that
I think, is a little interesting too, because their primary use case was EUC today, but they were really interested in where things are going in cloud native, Kubernetes, and AI for their future too. So they loved the fact that they were able to get a platform that somewhat future-proofed them, because they are already trying to make strategic sort of decisions around how that affects their business moving forward.
I think that mobility is so critical, right? We've had that for years. It's now as important as it ever was, right? We had customers over 10 years ago, right, who bought clusters, ran them for 5 years. Let's say they started with 8 nodes. They refreshed down to 6 nodes. But by doing a simple act of like cluster expand and then ejecting the old nodes, all the VMs, but also all of the data, all of the configurations for that platform, all float over to the new hardware. We have customers that have actually done this twice now, right? The cluster itself logically is over 10 years old. The hardware is much newer than that, right? But the customer got over to it with no forklift migrations, no complicated planning, and is able to swap that and basically change out those tires on the bus or change out the wings on the airplane as we were flying it. And I think that ability, when you're a customer who's in that camp of I am constrained in some way, shape, or form, whether it's thermals or power or rack space, that ability to be on Nutanix in some iteration, but then move to a faster, denser, smaller configuration has super benefits there, right? And able to get there so easily when the requirements maybe do get solidified in the future down the road.
It's also interesting to me because we've had a couple of customers come to us with some accelerated, and I'm being generous when I say accelerated, some really fast exits from a data center because either one condition or another, and they had to get out quickly. The nice thing here is the platform has the ability to help you with that portability of your data to another location when that happens as well. It's not something I would have thought. Like, moving data centers is not something that generally comes to mind as a often, running kind of initiative. It's kind of a big, painful thing. But I've run into too many customers here in the last year that they're faced with that, and the timelines are short. Ben, I know you're focusing a lot in on AI and things right now. It's news to me as we were kind of talking before the podcast about AMX and kind of moving some of this towards the CPUs. Um, you know, I guess how much of this are you kind of seeing or talking with people from an AI perspective?
Well, as we were talking, AI on the edge is a big thing. They want to be able to have their manufacturing lines have some kind of AI process into it. So that's become really big. Where I've also seen, and this is kind of, we were talking about this before the podcast, was this idea of AI agents that'll run locally in the environment. And so I can see a day where your laptop has a enhanced CPU slash GPU that can do some AI processing on it locally. And so as you see the AI market change, I think Jirah mentioned that, in some of the training that we've gotten, GPUs is the thing today, but that might not be the thing tomorrow. So this whole AI environment is going to continue to change. It's going to continue to put pressure on hardware vendors, software vendors to keep up. And so the thing that I like most about this with the Intel AMX capabilities is we continue to partner with our hardware vendors. And we continue to look at what's coming down the pipe and how the AI landscape is changing. And it's changing daily, if not hourly. And so I think we're in a good position as a company to, one, understand what's going on. And we've got great partnerships with people like Intel and NVIDIA and AMD that can really make these things happen. And so I consider us a player in the AI market. I think we're going to be a force in the AI market. And we've got customers that are leveraging our clusters to help deliver the AI initiatives very rapidly as well.
I agree. And in a rapid changing sort of ecosystem industry, this is faster than normal for even the other types of innovation I've seen. So you're right that it's turning upside down on it feels like on a daily basis. I know that's probably overstating it, but this is moving quickly.
What's wild about Nutanix to me right now, and I think what's going to make the GTS here just phenomenal and exciting is, we're dealing with the Broadcom thing. So we're helping customers evaluate Broadcom. Do they want to stay? Do they want to leave? How can they enhance their data centers? We're also looking at customers that are going, I'm no longer able to support legacy VMs. I got to move into a containerized environment. So we got solutions for that. And then you've got this whole AI thing that's brewing that, really puts us at the center of three big pillars that are going on right now that, in my opinion, and I hope everybody on the call would agree, and I'm sure our CEO and executives would agree, we're perfectly positioned to handle those three pillars. So it's according to what our customers come to us with, what problems they come to us with, we probably got a solution that can handle most of what they're dealing with.
I agree with that. Yeah. It plays in so many of the use cases, small to large, on-prem to cloud, anywhere in between, your choice of vendors. There's just so much packaged in to help you gain value for your business. We covered this at the top of the podcast, but I do want to come back to it because there are a few more points around the evolved release cycle for NCI or Nutanix Cloud Infrastructure, starting with 7.0. For me, the new release model moving away from long-term service releases and short-term service releases is that these new features get into the hands of customers faster in a mainstream long-term supported release. And I think that's a big advantage for us. I guess I'll ask the question, Chris, have you seen customers kind of holding back, staying on the LTS and missing out on some of the features and stuff that maybe this new release cycle is going to help?
Definitely in the enterprise space where I covered previously, there are customers that would go through one cycle of Nutanix installs a year just because they had over 500 nodes. Mm-hmm. So that's not a small task to undertake. And knowing that it takes a month to get on a new release, now they see the advantages of the stability of this particular 7.0 and the future models will have that sustainability so that they can plan better and knowing that they are not missing out and they will have a more predictable cycle. That's one of the biggest things that I tried to help plan and look ahead with them specifically so that they wouldn't be on the back end of a new update and like just finishing an upgrade. So they can stay ahead of that. And I think that that is, again, a focus from Nutanix on how can we better help our customers in today's age and really truly listen to what's best for those customers, because you want those improvements, but you've got to balance that out with day-to-day workloads as far as responsibilities. And I think this lends itself to better structure and better planning to help those customers.
So, Jirah, you said 2 releases a year. What are the other details in terms of supportability for the new model?
Sure. So the article calls out how, again, this is within our NCI product family, right? So that's AHV, AOS, Prism Central that manages all of that, the Flow networking stack, and then of course LCM for all the above. So each release enjoying 24 months of life cycle. So 15 months in the limelight of maintenance and updates, 9 months of additional support in that second year for just break fix support, and we're still, of course, supporting your full installation there. So 15 months of updates, covering you for more than a year if you were on annual updates, and then also additional runway if you ever had to delay for things like updating every 18 months or even at the tail end here every 24 months.
That's awesome. There's a lot here, and I'm sure we're only touching a small percentage. I've seen other slides and presentations. I know there was a lot coming out in version 7. So we're going to have some more things to talk about, things that are layered solutions like NUS, self-service in upcoming episodes. So I look forward to delving into more. Like I said, you guys are keeping us on our toes. There's a lot going on, a lot of new releases. So I'm really looking forward to exploring more together. And for everyone listening, I would say stay tuned. We've got a lot more happening, and I'm sure this week the 4 of us are going to get inundated with new information as we're here at Global Tech Summit, surrounded by all the technical folks at Nutanix. So on behalf of our crew, Chris, Jirah, and Ben, and myself, thanks for listening and spending a little time with us, and we will definitely be here again very soon and look forward to catching up. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.